All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends. So excited to be with you on this Saturday. So, very interesting topic that I decided to really embark on. It's because of the not only the confusion about it, but also the complexity of it. A lot of us in the Western world do not really grasp. I'm not saying that everybody, there are some who truly understand it, but it just overall. So, and I'm decided, okay, how about if I do live stream in addition to some requests from you guys? So I'm gonna just cover up about what this conflict is all about between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I've been in Azerbaijan before. I used to have layovers in Baku, so I'm very a little bit familiar with that part of the world. Uh, but there is a lot to that just meet the eye. And again, two things are gonna play a role into this before I launch into anything here: geography and history, as I always say, the importance of it. But before I'll get into this, like always, I like to extend my sincere thanks to the channel's members and supporters. I'm going to give a shout out to a new member by the name of Chen Yin. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Thank you so much for becoming a channel supporter. Truly appreciate it. And for you, if this is your first time here, please make sure to subscribe. I will greatly appreciate your support. And again, just to keep going, based on what I said before, that once we reach 100 members or supporters for the channel, I am going to do an exclusive Q&A for the members only. So once again, appreciate your all support. So let me just do some brief announcements here briefly. It's I have my upcoming health conversation with Dr. Stewart on Monday. I'm going to send you the link here. That's going to be covering the topic of depression. A lot of people do not know, they don't understand how to deal or handle depression. I'm sure you've encountered it in some member of family or some friends or whatever. So anyway, on Monday at 1900 hours, 1930, I'm sorry, that's when I'm going to be meeting with Dr. Stewart to address the topic of depression. Another thing about the ongoing government course, as you may know, I've already launched the course here. So if you are interested in learning about it and joining it, becoming a member there to learn more about how the government works or it doesn't. So that will be an interesting. So I have the next chapter on Tuesday at 1900 hours. So anyway, let's get into our topic. So what are we talking about today? As I said, the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So there are actually more than just three questions you need to ask. This is really part of what gets at the heart of geopolitics, because the location of it, but also the historical events that took place in not only in those two locations, but also in the whole region for that matter. So the question you need to at least ask yourself is, what is at the heart of this conflict? Assuming you never heard about this before. Okay. Second question is the timing of it. And with that, you're going to ask yourself, is there a subtle hand guiding the escalation? So you all know what I'm referring to, and I'm going to detail this as we move forward. The third question you need to ask is why Iran and Russia are concerned. Once again, you understand the geography of it and the history, it will make more sense to you. Then the last question within, at least to make you think, is how this may shape the geopolitical landscape, not only in that part of the world, but elsewhere. So this is what's very important to understand. And I am going to get into all this about what this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is all about. But first, I'm going to show you some pictures here, because I had to spend yesterday a few hours gathering the information to make sure it makes sense. So let's start with this gentleman here. This is the president of Azerbaijan. His name is Ilham Aliyev. So he's been in power for a while. So he's the one managing now these tensions regarding the conflict. His counterpart from Armenia is by the name of Vagan Karniki. Yeah, Kachaturayan. I hope I pronounce it correctly. I used to have a colleague of mine from Armenia. The name was Bache. I still remember. What a wonderful gentleman. So, so this is the president of Armenia. So, and remember, most of the time you're going to be seeing, you don't see the president, you see the prime minister that's managing the whole dealing with this. So the one thing that I believe we need to have at least is understanding that both the Republic of Armenia and Azerbaijan have long been engaged in this bitter struggle. And why is because over one specific location or region that is called Nagorno-Karabakh. That is the key. So I'm going to detail as to why that is. So despite two previous wars, yes, they did have military conflicts between the two. Violence has once again erupted this time around. As a matter of fact, now they lay down the ground. The ones in Armenia lay down the ground in the region in Karabakh, which is prompting us to question as to the root causes. And with it, it comes the question, could external forces be at play here? And of course, as we all know, sometimes there are the tensions being fomented from outside to ignite the flame of the conflict in this part of the region. So, and we've seen it before. So it's nothing new here. So if we are to say, so what I'm going to try to do here is try to examine the role of Western powers in this perplexing situation, because it is perplexing, given that how many times they've been back and forth with this war. It'll go for a week, then it'll stop. You go for 3 months, then all of a sudden it picks up, And this time around, I find it very, very interesting. And for one reason only, in my opinion, and I will detail later, but I want to give it or let you know about it. Two things is that Russia is concerned with it because of the border. So is Iran on the Armenian side. So that is why I decided to okay, it behooves us to ask, is there a subtle hand guiding the escalation? So, and if so, why? Because as an analyst, I will have to ask why that is. So, and this is why I wanted to shed light, at least briefly, underlying the motives behind the unrest, while at the same time uncovering potential ulterior agendas or motives that may be beyond what meet the eyes. And this is one thing that Western audience might not grasp really the full detail about it. So here's the thing. By dissecting the historical and the geopolitical factors, what I'm aiming at here is to what's the word I'm looking for? Foster some sort of an understanding about this conflict. At least you have a background. So that's all it is. So let's start with history first, then I'll go into geography, then I'll go into my brief analysis about all this. So let's start with history. So Armenia and Azerbaijan, of course. Now, you have to go all the way back to 1918. That's how far back you have to go. Specifically on May 29th, 1918. And why is this? It's because that's when both the conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan began after their independence from the Russian Empire back then. Okay? And they entered into territorial disputes. So over the territories that each saw as a historically and ethnically their own. So, which is the most of them is Nagorno-Karabakh. That is why Nagorno-Karabakh keeps coming up to the forefront, because it's both politically, ethnically, and of course geographically. That is what made it very, very concerning, complicated for Western audience to understand. So the conflicts between the two, Armenia and Azerbaijan, continued even between 1918 and 1920. So, and you all know what happened after, because around that time, that was the end of World War I. But these conflicts soon ceased after they joined the Soviet Union together in 1922. That is what makes it very interesting. So they split up at some time, then they joined again the Soviet Union in 1922, and we all know what happened with the Bolshevik in the Soviet Union or Russia back then. the Russian Empire. Then he moved into the Soviet Union. So this conflict, or those conflicts back then, quickly ignited immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. Why? Because Azerbaijan and Armenia became independent states. So this resulted in a bloody war between the two. So, of course, many thousands have died as a result of that one, let alone the displaced individuals, which is exactly what we're seeing right now, for example, in certain parts in Sudan. Just had to read something about it yesterday. It was heartbreaking to see, families just displaced, kids, and it's sad. It was very, very sad. So now here's the thing. So this conflict from that time lasted almost a century, and that despite international mediations and numerous attempts by the Minsk group, that's what's interesting about it. Why? Because of course the negotiations took place in Minsk, in Belarus, which were specifically established in 1992, 1 year after the dissolve of the Soviet Union. And that was exactly for one objective only: to resolve the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And mind you, that a lot of countries were involved in this. As a matter of fact, 17 countries were involved under the the chairmanship of France, Russia, and the United States. But once again, it's very important to understand its beginning. And I digged into archives to find out one particular picture that I need to share with you, just for you to see. And I'm going to leave this on here for just a minute, because you have to go back to the Treaty of 1828. That's what that picture is all about. So the root of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan dates back to the beginning of the 19th century, when the Goldstan Peace Treaty, which was signed in 1813, and 1813, and the Turkmenistan Peace Treaty signed in 1828, which what you see the picture of, were concluded between the Russian and the Persian empires, under which the Russians and the Persian empires rapidly settled Armenians from Iran and Turkey in the region, completely changing the ethnic composition of the region. This is why it's important to understand. Of course, you move into 1917 with the October Revolution in the Tsarist Russia, which contributed to the establishment of the Soviet Union, as I mentioned earlier. Of course, after the overthrow of the Bolsheviks of the then Russian Provisional Government led by Vladimir Lenin, which proclaimed the Russian Federative Soviet Socialist Republic, known as USSR. And by the way, through the unification of the Russian, Ukrainian, and Caucasian republics comprising, listen carefully, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, as well as Belarus. That's why it's important to understand this part of history. So the root of the conflict between the two neighbors, Azerbaijan and Armenia, over Nagorno-Karabakh, which has come to be known as the volatile region, go back at least a century, even when Joseph Stalin, the second commander of the Soviet Union back then, annexed this territory to the border drawing of Azerbaijan and granted it the authority of autonomy within the Republic of Azerbaijan. That is why it's important to understand this part of history. And of course, you will see when I share with you the geography, because I still have to go over some historical aspects on Armenia side as well. So the next question we need to ask is, okay, well, where is the cause of this? Is this only about politics? Is this only about territory, borders, or is it religion involved as well? Which is a fair question to ask, because you can't ignore that, given how religion in that part of the world cemented the power of the ruling elites, like in any other parts of the world. You look at it with certain countries where religion play a role in really dictating the political direction of the country. Excuse me. So the cause of war or the conflict, that is so. And this one, because you look at it again geographically, the two countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, they both located at a major crossroads between Eastern Europe, that's one side, and Western Asia. And this is why it's over this breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh, each trying to extend control over a region that is for decades has been the scene of competition for influence between Armenian Christians, Turkish Muslims, and Persians. So religion does play a role into all this. And by the way, guys, I will put the links of all this in the description. For now, I just need to keep going forward. So first of all, let's break down the word Nagorno-Karabakh. What does Nagorno mean? Nagorny. Some will pronounce it Nagorno, some will pronounce it Nagorny. So which means mountainous in Russians. And Karabakh, which means black garden. So now you understand at least. So in Turkish, but the Armenian called the region Artsakh, which means our forest, in the sun god for the ancient Armenians. So there's some symbolic, historical, and religious and social symbolism into this area here. So what happened? Fast forward into this, Azerbaijan confronted the separatists with weapons at that time in an attempt to suppress the demonstrators and control the situation. And Armenian supporters thus demanding cessation from Azerbaijan, which led to a conflict between the two countries. One thing I need you to understand: in Nagorno-Karabakh, the population this is of Armenian ethnic background, but residing under the Azerbaijani country. So that's one of those very reminds me of what's going on in eastern Ukraine. The population is Russian ethnic, and yet the government in Kiev wants to suppress that. That's why it's very, very important to understand. And I'm not going to go over again. And by the way, that picture I showed you, that's from the Treaty of Turkmenistan, signed in it's right here, in 1829. I'm sorry, 1828. So it's very, very important. 1828. So here's the thing. Despite Armenia declaring that Karabakh's independence in a referendum in December 1991, this independence was not considered, or it was considered rather unilaterally, which means the decision was made only by Armenia and irregular. And due to the status of the region, which then became self-rule, which left the crisis between Azerbaijan and Armenia sort of increasing. So then things developed into a war for years, that, as you may know. So this is almost reminding me of the region of Khalistan, like we talked about yesterday. And also, speaking of that, before I forget, guys, for those who watched the live stream yesterday, I just came to my attention last night that there is evidence that India was involved. So sometimes it's not wrong with changing your mind in the appearance of evidence. So the evidence is classified because it's classified under the structure of the Five Eyes, and it was through a member of the Five Eyes that has the access to that information. And again, I can't reach conclusion for you. All I'm saying is there is evidence there. The only thing is that the Canadian government, based on what I found last night, that the Canadian government will not disclose that because there is a member of the Five Eyes involved. As one who worked in Washington, I can guess who that is. No, don't think it's the United States. It's not. So anyway, so here's the thing now about this conflict. So the conflict between these two neighbors is renewed every time on the border That is where exactly is always renewed. And that border is Nagorno-Karabakh, to the point that the Russians, and the reason why Russians were part of this is because the Russians have a treaty with, I have a picture that I need to share with you here. So I want you to see it. Those are the Russian troops, sort of that maintain peace in the region. And I'll tell you why that is. Let me share this picture here. All right, here is the picture. Those are Russian troops here. This is the region of Nagorno-Karabakh on the Armenian side. And the reason being because Russia has a treaty with Armenia. So this is what I'm saying. All the time, the conflict will have to start, or always started, at the borders in Nagorno-Karabakh, which is recognized as part of the Republic of Azerbaijan, and who is recognized by the international community. And this is with in accordance with the provisions of international law and so forth. So, but at the same time, if we are to say this, how come, for example, you take certain parts of the world where they have similar situation? For us, and again, this is my own analysis here. For us, we take interest in this because it serves the Western agenda, that is, given the border with Russia and with Iran, and we can hit two birds with one. And I will explain as I move forward on this. So like I said before, international mediations has been involved, was futile in putting an end to the conflict between the two countries. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it doesn't. Once in a while, you go for a peaceful period, then all of a sudden, clashes again in the Nagorno-Karabakh. So, because all parties involved in it were considered non-neutral and largely subject to historical, economic, and military relations that bind them to the region. That is why. So, 1988, the conflict resumed again, and when the Armenians of Karabakh demanded the secession of the region from Soviet Azerbaijan. Remember the timing, 1988, and cession to Soviet Armenia, because at that time Armenia already decided to stay with the Soviet Union at that time. So and the conflict developed into a full-scale war between the two countries in early 90s, right after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. And after that, here is what happened after that. Karabakh declared its independence with the aim of reunification with Armenia, not Azerbaijan. So, to be one of the most important reasons for the beginning of the war between these two countries. So, basically, in a simple language, Nagorno-Karabakh wants to be affiliated with Armenia because the reason that the ethnic population in Karabakh are of Armenian descent. That is what's at the heart of it. But the conflicts between the two countries, because both of them wish to annex the small region of the Caucasus to its territory. As Armenia says that this region belongs to it, citing the majority of Armenian, like I mentioned, Armenian population says that this region belongs to it, and Armenian population want to be affiliated with Armenia, not Azerbaijan. Otherwise, Azerbaijan considered Nagorno-Karabakh land of its territory, which led again to the outbreak of the First War and contributed significantly to the displacements of hundreds of thousands of Armenians from Azerbaijan to Armenia. This is part of and I'm not going to go through the major battles, and all that, because again, you go back to 1922 and forward all this to 1988, then 1991, then 1992, 1994, then all of a sudden what we have in 2009 when the negotiations took. But of course, in 2011, those negotiations sort of resulted in a proposal solutions that both parties failed, to reach an agreement at the end. That's why it resumed again. The clashes resumed in 2014. It's gonna be that way because here's the thing: you got the significance of the Azeri soldiers reportedly killed by Armenians, and Azerbaijani soldiers reportedly shut down an Armenian military helicopter in November of that year, in 2014. This is why escalations go back and forth for only a few days. They had another war in a 4-day war in 2016. So you can just see the pattern here. But the pattern you need to ask is it fueled by outside? Can it be resolved? So it's hard. It's hard to tell. It's a very, very, very complicated. And again, I'm going to put all the links for you guys for later on. So let's look at geography because it's a very, very important to understand the geography. And I collected some maps and so forth for you to see. So I'm going to be putting maps and leaving some on just for you to see. What you're looking at this picture here, just to provide you a big picture as to the landscape where it is. So you got Georgia here. I'm pointing at it with my cursor, but you can see it. Then you had Azerbaijan right here on the southeast. Then you got Armenia south, then south of Georgia, Turkey. Then on the left of Abkhazia, you have the Black Sea. So why is this important about Georgia here? You're looking at two locations there, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Of course, this happened a few years back. And I remember when I was doing my research on the Russian book that I wrote, at that time, it was Georgia's president at that time, Mikhail Saakashvili, is the one who tried to take Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Why is this important for you to understand? Because Abkhazia and Ossetia has majority population that they want affiliated with the Russians. Because remember, Georgia used to be a Soviet part under the Soviet orbit at that time. So what Mikhail Saakashvili, he's not too bright geopolitically. I don't insult the gentleman there, but when it comes down to geopolitics, he wasn't smart enough to understand that he was played by NATO. What happened is when he sent his troops to Abkhazia and South Ossetia, he wants to take over and eliminate all the Russian ethnic population. Russia said, hell no. So what Russia ended up doing is demobilized, and the Georgian knew, because Russia declared that, hey, Georgia, you better not do that, otherwise we will be forced to send our troops. Well, guess what NATO said to the former president Mikhail Saakashvili? Oh, he said, don't worry about it. We will come to your support. Oh, just don't worry, we'll fight the Russians. What he didn't realize, this is where I see the stupidity comes in. What he didn't realize is that, first of all, Russia wasn't bluffing, and he was about to defend the ethnic Russians in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And Russia knew that NATO would not get involved because NATO just talks. And when Russia sent the military and took over in few days, it took them few days. Then Saakashvili had to leave with his tail between his legs because he was defeated so bad. And he's saying to NATO, why don't you come in to help me? And NATO said, what are you, crazy? Do you want us to fight a nuclear Russia? Well, duh, you should have think about it. Then what did Mikhail Saakashvili said after that? He said, well, watch, now Russia's going to invade Finland and Sweden. It's the same statement the president comedian Zelensky just said 2 days ago in the UN when he said that soon Russians going to take over Poland, which is nonsense. It's a lie, basically. And the reason for that, because Poland decided to stop supporting Ukraine with armaments. So what the comedian president Zelensky wants to do is to foment tension. The same thing Mikhail Saakashvili did back then. And you will think they will learn something from history. They did not. So, and this is why I wanted to show you this to put in perspective this for you. The second thing I want you to understand about this map is you just look at the borders. Of course, to Turkey, For us in the United States, we have a button that we can press Turkey if we need to. And you know what that button is? The genocide of Armenia, because we say that Turkey committed genocide in Armenia. Turkey is saying no, it didn't, because there were some clashes back then, major ones. So, and I can't judge because I did look at in depth of the historical facts about this for me to just state my own opinion. And I can't get emotional and just say whatever. No, I can't do that. So now let me share the map with you here about Azerbaijan. So you, from a geographical perspective. So Azerbaijan. So because, and I said I've been there before. I've been in Baku, and I remember when I was flying in, as I get closer to Baku, all I said was, it's a mountainous area, very outside, very rich in oil, by the way. So, and you can put your two and two together and figure out. Now I see why conflicts can come in back and forth. So Azerbaijan has a physical variety and complicated boundaries. The territories, which is about 30, I think about 34,000 square miles, including the region of the autonomous Nagorno-Karabakh, which is currently occupied by Armenian forces. So this is one thing about. The one thing that I need you to know is the another autonomous republic of Nakhchivan, which is separated from Azerbaijan proper by the Zangezur region of Armenia. So, and there are other several cluster of islands in the Caspian Sea. Baku, Azerbaijan capital, is situated in the northern shore of the Bay of Baku on the Abseron Abseron Peninsula, which juts into the Caspian Sea. So this is what's important about this one here. There's another map of it here. Azerbaijan right here. That's the same one I showed you. So now let me see another one here for a map for you. And to look at just, again, you guys can see me pointing with my cursor here, but just to highlight to you how intricate this geography is, which end up, like I always said, in the field of political science, there is a field by itself called the political geography. It's because the role of geography that end up impacting political decisions. And we are witnessing this one here. Because that's for sure, it's part of that one. So this is what I wanted to share with you as far as geography. This is another one here for Azerbaijan here. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is Armenia, not Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is right here, and Armenia is right here. And when you look at the borders with Iran and Turkey, you can see why the concern in both locations here. So this is what's very, very important about it. So now as far as the geography of Armenia, it's also worth looking at, because otherwise it won't make sense to you when you hear this, Nagorno-Karabakh issue and so forth, and without understanding that geography, it won't make sense to you. So for Armenia is considered in southwestern part of Asia, between Turkey to the west and Azerbaijan to the north. So Armenia view itself as, believe it or not, as part of Europe. So, and if you look at it geopolitically, it can be classified as falling within Europe, the Middle East, or both. This is what makes Turkey, in this case, very, very strategic, and why NATO was interested, or the US at that time, in alluring Turkey into the NATO alliance. So I do have another map here for Armenia. This is more detailed here. And see where this region here, Nagorno-Karabakh, see what it is? Even though it's under territory in Azerbaijan, is still back and forth between, and there is not much distance here between the two, if you look at that. But one thing important to understand is the history of Armenia also. And again, it was similar to what was happening with Azerbaijan. But for Armenia, it mainly has to do with 1921, when Nagorno-Karabakh was placed within the Soviet Azerbaijan as an autonomous sort of oblast, and that decision that the Armenian political leaders and the public repeatedly sought to alter through petitions and complaints starting in 1930s. So what took place again in the Soviet period? A separatist movement developed, and that sought to end Azerbaijan control over the region. And this is where the fighting started to erupt in Nagorno-Karabakh, began in 1988. Of course, escalated after Armenia and Azerbaijan attained independence, as I mentioned earlier, in 1991. So interesting enough is that by 1994, separatists with Armenian support controlled Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 other surrounding Azerbaijani territories, which constitute about 14% of Azerbaijan overall territory. So Armenia and Azerbaijan keeps engaging back and forth, and this one will be the second military conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh in September 2020. Wasn't that far. And by which, at that time, as a result, Armenia lost control over much of the territory it had captured a quarter century earlier. But here is the interesting aspects of all this. One, it has to do with this, with the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation. Why is this important? It is important because you need to understand that when Armenia returned the territories around Nagorno-Karabakh and some parts of Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan and accepted, this is where the key, a lot of people in the West do not understand, because Armenia accepted the remaining territorial connection of Nagorno-Karabakh, okay, because they accepted the deployments of the Russian peacekeeping to remainder of the region. Another word, Russia has a treaty with Armenia that Russia will come to the defend of the Armenians, and this is why now Armenian is lashing out at Russia for not coming to its defense. But the question you need to ask yourself is, why the conflict now? Is because the West, as an analyst, I will think about it openly, is that what we wanted to do is we wanted to split the forces of the Russians between what's taking place in Ukraine, and you add another conflict front in Armenia. That is the objective of it. So Russia didn't respond to that, even though it has treaty with Armenia. But Russia has also good relationship with Azerbaijan. And it's all about geopolitical dynamics here to understand. This is why it's important. And a lot of people in the West, they don't seem to really grasp the dynamics that's taking place. And this is just from one end, which is the Soviet or Russian, or rather, not Soviet Union, Russian. So let me put this back again, and I need to, not this map here, but I need to show you another country here that you need to know. Is Iran. You need to understand that. And by the way, Turkey has a border with Armenia, which closed back in 1993 in support of Azerbaijan, because Turkey is supporting Azerbaijan, not Armenia, And this is what happened during the first part of the conflict. Closed the border since then, leaving Armenian with the closed borders, both in the west with Turkey and the east with Azerbaijan, which means what? Landlocked. So, of course, as you know, Armenia and Turkey engaged in an intensive diplomacy to normalize their relations and open the border in 2009. But the signed agreement was not ratified in either country. which means what in simple language? It became dead. In 2018, it was just dead. So, and this is why Armenia in 2018 withdrew its signature. Because remember, in 2015, Armenia joined the Euro-Asian Economic Union alongside Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. However, in November 2017, Armenia signed a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement known as CEPA with the EU. So now you understand why Russia didn't want to send its troops. If Armenia is playing both sides, Russia's saying to itself, oh, wait a minute. Yes, we have a treaty with you, but at the same time, don't cause the conflict, because Russia stepped in, as a matter of fact. Russia invited both about a year ago, or a year and a half ago or so, invited both leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia to Moscow and settled that conflict in 2020. But also we understand that if we created a conflict in the border between Azerbaijan and Russia, or Armenia and Russia, we kind of create, because here's the thing, I need to show this map again. Look where Russia is. So if we created an issue on a border, or even a conflict right here in Nagorno-Karabakh, but it's still, because if Russia has a treaty with Armenia, that means it needs to step in. That is what's important about understanding these dynamics. So now I need to share with you something one of our viewers shared here. I didn't get a permission to disclose the name, so I'm not going to disclose the name, even though screen name. I don't assume, because I got to respect their privacy here, except that this individual wrote, and I quote, I am an Azeri Iranian and support Armenia. This conflict between Armenia and Baku is about everything: resources, geopolitics, foreign interference, Belt and Road Initiative, which is true. The BRI is also part of that conversation. BP, British Petroleum, has invested heavily in oil and gas in Baku. That is true. Israel has got a foothold in Baku to increase tensions between Iran and Israel, because if Azerbaijan place some military on the border near Iran, it's problem for Iran. So American soldiers are in Armenia to help Baku invade Armenia and capture the corridor that connects Turkey to Baku. Also, if this happens, the Chinese Belt and Road project will stop completely. Also, the Europeans are trying to block any corridor that connects Russia with Iran. There are many players in this conflict. End of quote. Spot on. And thank you so much to this individual who shared this with us. This is why, guys, I always say, I read the comments. I read them because that's how you learn. So if you get a chance to read, and if you next time, guys, if you put something and you would like me to share and disclose the name, the screen name, I'll be happy to do so. I just didn't get the permission, so I'm not going to just assume. So thank you so much for sharing that. And spot on, is spot on. And this leads me to address the idea of why all of a sudden, how the Iran views the ceasefire now in Karabakh. Of course, Iran is going to have to welcome that. Because any tensions on the border is going to have to bring in Western intervention. Western interventions means that tensions on the border in Iran. And Iran doesn't trust any. As a matter of fact, Iran had to deploy, to my knowledge, some of its IRGC forces with heavy artillery to the border. So, and rightly so, because they are concerned. So can you imagine Israel being involved with Baku? What does it mean for Iran, given the hypes that Israel threatening to bomb certain underground nuclear facilities for Iran and so forth? So, which I don't see happening. It's because for Israel, it will be a strategic mistake, because here is what will happen. And I'll disclose it, because if Israel attacks Iran, Iran will shower Israel with missiles. I know this for a fact. And the Iron Dome in Israel, whatever, ain't gonna cut it. So that's why, this is why you are, like when I had the conversation with Scott, this is why we couldn't attack Iran, because we know what the outcome will be. Despite what you hear, the hypes, we know better. No different than North Korea. We know better because we know what's going to happen. So, and here is what's interesting. Before these recent tensions, and this is, by the way, also another reason why the defense minister of Russia, Shoigu, was in Iran, not only to strengthen the strategic ties between Iran and Russia. This is another issue, was part of the conversation there. So here's the thing. Before this latest conflict, the whole region of the Caucasus, Iran sent a delegation, believe it or not, a military delegation to Baku. Why? To sign a document, therefore joint defense and military cooperation. Because they wanted to make sure that stability will have to be, because that part of the world, not only it's rich in natural resources, but you look at, like that our viewers mentioned about the BRI. BRI is going through there. This is why this new corridor from G20, which is nothing but a hypes, it said, well, we will bypass the Euro-Asian or the whole Caucasus region together. Yeah, right. If you only know the cost of it to do it through that. So, at the same time, when Iran sent the military delegation to Baku, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi had a phone conversation with the Armenian Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan. So, and this is why, is to sort of change the border as a red line for Iran, because the question was for Iran, if there is any foreign military presence near its border, is problematic. And once again, just look at the map here, and you see why Iran is very concerned. Look how close it is to Nagorno-Karabakh in comparison to some other parts. And this is why Iran is thinking on both ends of the conflict, because they wanted to ensure, because like a geography plays a role in understanding. So there are those some suggesting, and this is again based on an analysis that was conducted by Iranian observers, and there are some good analysts from Iran. They really spot on. I think of what's his name, Professor Morandi. A very, very intellectual guy. He's spot on most of his assessments, and he understands how to read the geopolitical landscape, not only in Iran but around the world. I have great respect for Professor Morandi, and I would love to have him one day on the show if he can make it himself. So here's the thing. In Iran, within certain circles, because even Iran has its own domestic tensions and so forth, but some believe that the Azeri attack was a Russian green light, believe it or not. And why is this? Because it was the aim at retaliating against Yerevan for approaching Western powers led by the US. This is why Iran spread the red carpet for the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who described Tehran as a strategic partner. Usually in the world of geopolitics, when you use the term strategic partner, is a very heavy, carries a lot of weight. I am not surprised at this. I wrote about it in my Iran book back then, when it was a visit by a high-ranking general from the Russian Defense Ministry to Iran at that time. It was the same thing from a high-ranking general from China to Iran at that time. So to me, when you see the term strategic partners, that means a lot. So and it holds significance. So this is why Shoigu had to address these issues with the Iranian leadership, including the Azerbaijan-Armenia tensions. So nothing happens in a vacuum, guys. It's very, very important. So now, there is the other aspects that I need you to understand. And again, they are, again, as I said, they are Iranian analysts who really, their analysis is very objective. And I read some, and I can't just assume just because they are from Iran, they don't know whatever. No, they do. They do now. It's sometimes I feel it's the arrogance. We do have some of us, not all, of course, this arrogance of we know it all, we know better, when in reality we don't. We are clueless and poor readers of history. This is why we couldn't understand this dynamics. So the argument is that, according to this Iranian researcher, that the truth, which I agree with him or her, because I don't know, it's he or she. Again, now the arms have been laid down. So there is a truce. Just in a few months, we might see a new eruption of the conflict. So that's why it was described as a fragile truce, which is true. So, and especially if the Armenian side is strengthened, or here's the key, because remember, Armenia wants to identify with Europe. If some Western powers, including the United States, intervene to create a spot of tension in Armenia as Russia's backyard, or even the intervention of Israel as it enters into the line of incitements in Baku. This is according to this Iranian researchers. And I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Because that Zanjaruz corridor, it's near the Iranian border. Let's look at the map here. Just, I don't know if it shows here, but I doubt it. Yeah, it's right here. This corridor is going to be in this area. I know I'm pointing at it, but you guys can't see it. So this is where I see the importance of understanding this dynamics. So remember, as I said, the Russians have broken the sort of a deal between Baku and Yerevan. Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. Back in 2020, which usually this deal or the agreement back then worried Iran, and especially when it comes down to the closure of the open corridor to connect Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan Autonomous Region through the Armenian province in Sinek, bordering Iran territory. So, and all of this, why? Because Iran will be concerned about being cut off, because this will cut off the road in between Iran and Eastern Europe via Armenia. Geography plays a major role in understanding those dynamics. They don't happen in a vacuum, guys. And this is why the complexity of this Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict, it's not easy to understand it over a session here for 1 hour. It's more complicated. But at least I feel comfortable saying that at least now you have at least a basic understanding. Once you start hearing, the next question you always need to ask yourself, how come these conflicts keep erupting in that part of the world occasionally? The timing couldn't be more important. So that's what I need you to understand. Anyway, let me see if I can oh, I see your point. And I didn't say he is not, because I do not know that relationship. So you said no, Dr. David, it is exactly the opposite. The Armenian PM is puppet of George Soros. Everybody knows that. Yeah, I mean, I do know the Prime Minister of Armenia is playing sides. I'm aware of that. As to go to these aspects here, I can't confirm that one personally, but I am aware of what George Soros is doing in that part of the world. So yeah, I respect your opinion for that. So, all right, guys. Did Victoria Nolan went there? Yes, she was in the region. Victoria Nolan was in the region previously, so I was aware of her trip. Yeah, I was aware of that one. So it's we all know why. So and this is again for me. when I do this kind of topics, guys, I just want to at least provide you a background, just the basic background of understanding, because it's such a complex issue. Let alone if you even ask some, where is Azerbaijan? They won't even know where it's located. That was the same thing for some of us here in the West. I won't deny it. A lot of people have no clue or had no clue where Ukraine was. They didn't know. So that's in any event. I wish you guys you find this very informative, and I look forward to seeing you next time. As always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time. Bye bye.